Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in to the Don't Get Last Guillotine podcast. I'm your host, Joe Harris. With me today, we've got a guest for the first time, Wolf Trellis-Heard, also known as the Dynasty Wolf, across Twitter, across other places. Wolf, welcome into the show, my friend.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it. I was happy when you reached out, and glad that you and I could link up here, and excited to talk some football tonight. So let's get after it, brother.
Absolutely. So, like we do at the start of all of these shows, if it's someone who I have played in a guillotine league with, we review their guillotine performance. I thought you did pretty good this year. I'm not gonna lie. So, you were in Don't Get Last League 7 last year, which was with a lot of other medium-sized creators, and then backfilled with a handful of my friends who were asking, "Hey, can we play in the league with some of the fantasy football guys? We want to see how we do against them."
Yeah.
So that was a fun league. I had a really good time in that. Let's start with the draft. Was the no nonsense as no nonsense gets in the draft? Your first six picks: three running backs, three receivers. Christian McCaffrey at the 1.9, which was, I mean, at in all formats, wherever you got Christian McCaffrey last year, you were stealing. The injury discount is kind of always going to be hanging over this guy's head, and you weren't afraid of it. Is there a particular reason you weren't afraid of it or guillotine purpose last year, or were you just willing to, drop your nuts on people, draft Christian McCaffrey everywhere?
Well, yeah. It's like you said there. I mean, at the 1.9, McCaffrey is the one guy essentially who is like a set it and forget it weekly cheat code, right? When he's healthy. And we're going to
Hmm.
touch on him later because you haven't mentioned it yet, but we're going to be talking about the NFC West tonight, you and I.
That's
But
correct. Yeah.
yeah, so we'll talk more about McCaffrey. But my thoughts was just, he's a guy who can just win you a week almost by himself anytime he's
Hmm.
healthy. At the 1.9, he was a steal there. And then the rest of the way through my first few rounds was I really wanted to just try and get as many shots at running back and receiver as I could and
Hmm.
wait on quarterback. And I thought I did a pretty good job with that. I had various hits or misses at various points of the season with guys. Some guys started really well, like AJ
Sure.
Brown, or not AJ
Oh yeah.
Brown, McCaffrey
And Mecca.
started well. Metcalf
Mhm.
started well. Egbuka, Javonte Williams,
Yeah.
Jake Ferguson hit for me there, which was a nice
Mhm.
one. And then I had some guys, later on who played well when those guys kind of started to fall off a little bit. But that was kind of my plan going into it, and I thought I did a pretty good job with that. And yeah, so I was happy with the results.
Definitely. You made it all the way into week 14. You scored 98 points in your elimination, which even as late as week 14, that's still a pretty high number um, to have and go out with. You needed 103 to survive. It really came down to the wire there. Um, and that was the Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey's not on this team that I'm looking at on the was this the Christian McCaffrey bye week? I think this might have been the Christian
Yeah,
McCaffrey.
because they had a late buy last week, so I
Mhm.
couldn't use CMC. And my downfall was I blew my fab way too early. So I don't know if you remember, but the Jamar Chase owner lost week one. So I
Yeah.
think I dropped like 85% of my budget week one
Mhm.
on Chase because the allure of just adding him to a
Right.
squad with CMC was just too much for me. So
It's
um,
tantalizing.
exactly. So it was great early on, but I think you can see here, he didn't have a great week. That came back to bite me in the butt. I didn't have a lot of fab to contend with some of the other guys down the stretch there and get some of those guys who were falling. So I was stuck, those last final weeks with kind of mostly the same crew that I had for a while there.
Mhm. That that's definitely something that, I rap against as much as I can, with respect, of course. I've just played in a lot of leagues, and I've seen a lot of people drop the bag early, um, and those tend to not be the people that make it especially far, especially considering how much you spent on Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Your season went very well, I thought.
No,
Um,
appreciate it.
Tell me about this late quarterback plan, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, because to me this is not something that I recommend very highly at all. I think it worked out. You knew what you wanted in Trevor Lawrence. You got it. Liam Cohen going there
Yep.
was a revelation, especially down the stretch. But generally, I like to say that um, the quarterbacks are the guys that score the most points for the most
Oh
part.
yeah.
Like obviously, there's Christian McCaffrey, there's AJ Brown at the top. But after that, if you want raw points, you probably are better off taking quarterback. And so I tend to suggest that people um, take a guy earlier. Was that something that you had in mind, format specific, and just not really caring about that, thinking that you knew what you had in Trevor Lawrence towards the bottom of the draft? Or was it just a I always draft late quarterback ever since, JJ Zachariason in 2012 was like, guys, what if we didn't draft Tom Brady round one this time?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's that's not always my strategy, but in here I remember kind of leading up and doing drafts coming into this that Lawrence was just falling, I thought, pretty far. And
Mhm.
I thought his upside, kind of like you talked about in the Liam Cohen offense, was just going to be very good. We saw what Baker did in 2024, over 4,000 yards, 45 touchdowns. And I thought he can kind of spin a little bit of that magic onto Lawrence, and he did, right? He had career highs in touchdown passes and rushing touchdowns last year. So it worked pretty well. I was happy with that. Getting Rodgers late, I thought he'd be a solid QB2 that I could use. I
Mhm.
just kind of underestimated how cooked his arm was,
Yeah,
to be honest with you. And,
I think Pittsburgh did
I
too, for
thought,
what it's worth.
yeah, I thought him and DK would be a decent stack, and it looked okay for about the first 4 to 5 weeks, but that fell off completely as the season went
Mhm.
on.
Yeah. Just I mean, we always knew that he wasn't gonna be the guy that we were used to, but man, the fall off. I mean, the difference between him and even when he was on the Jets the year before last, I felt was pretty stark. But
Yeah, it was tough to watch. I got a good stat here. He was 37th in air yards per attempt last year, and there's
oh
only
boy,
32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL.
right.
So
Well, I mean, Joe Flacco obviously towards the top of that list. He backed up for 2 teams, so
oh yeah.
all right, let's get started with the NFC West. We're gonna talk. The first team I want to go in on is the Los Angeles Rams for, I think, obvious reasons. The odds-on Super Bowl favorite by a lot. It's not like they're neck and neck with anyone. It is Rams plus 500 ish, and everyone else is at plus 1,000. So, I mean, the first question is, who do you think the Rams are playing against in the Super Bowl this year?
That's a good one. You know, I would love to see the Bears continue what they grew in Ben Johnson's first season, take
Mm,
another step forward. I know they have a tough schedule this year, but I love the way Ben Johnson coaches. I think he's a
yep.
fantastic play caller. I'm more bullish on Caleb than I think a lot of people are. So
Mm.
I think that'd be an exciting game right there. Rams, Bears, give that to me for the NFC Championship game.
For sure. Yeah, I would love to see something like that too, especially because I have a lot of friends who live in Chicago, so being in group
There you
chats with
go.
them and, I'm from Kansas City, so they've been in the group chats while we've had some nice playoff runs and nice playoff stress. It would be nice to be on the other side of that coin to
Right.
be able to root for the team without being as stressed about it. But let's get started at the top. Obviously, Matthew Stafford heading this team, the MVP of the NFL last season. And this is probably as late as you're ever going to see a guy who's 1 year removed from being the MVP of the NFL get drafted. He's going at QB 15. He is outside the top 100 picks in a draft. And I think there's reasons for that. the fantasy industry has gotten smart about guys who have a lot of touchdown passes who don't have a lot of rushing yards, and Stafford fits the bill for that. I noted my very advanced stats here. He had exactly 1 rushing yard last season, which is
It's one
pretty
more
awesome.
than you and I.
It's it's 2 more than Kurt Benkert. And over on the left of this slide, we have I have a list of all of the highest pass touchdown rates in a single season in NFL history. Matthew Stafford last year had a 7.7% touchdown rate, which is one of the 30 highest in a single season in NFL history. It's actually, no, that's closer to like one of the 12 highest in a single season in NFL history. And I pulled the top 30 over here. One thing you'll notice, it might be a little blurry for those of you watching on YouTube because this image will have been compressed and re-uploaded 3 times by the time it reaches your eyeballs, is that every single person on this list is not there the following year. Or if they are there, it's with a significant decrease. And who's still on this list is Aaron Rodgers going from 2020 to 2021, who still saw a 2% drop off between both of those rates. So Stafford at 7.7%, probably coming back down to earth a little bit. What are your thoughts on the Stafford touchdown rate?
He absolutely is. And like you said, fantasy managers have gotten sharper, right? Because years ago, this is a guy who probably would have been picked in the 3rd or 4th round of drafts after a season like
Yeah.
Matthew Stafford just had, right? But they're smarter now, right? They realize that was an outlier season. Stafford's older. He's definitely going to regress. So, like you, I recently did a regression article, and funny enough, all of the guys I talked about are going to be on the show tonight.
Oh,
So I
wow.
have some good facts there, but
That's awesome.
he's definitely going to regress because I pulled some numbers, right? Stafford was the 8th quarterback in history to throw for at least 46 touchdowns in a season. Okay.
Okay.
The other 7 guys, their very next full season, had an average decrease of 16.4 touchdowns. So right off the bat, 46 for Stafford last year. You're talking roughly 30, this year if he kind of follows that suit. The only guy who didn't have a double-digit decrease was Drew Brees, who had I think 46 in 2011, and then he followed it up with 43 the next year. So he only had a decrease of 3. Everybody else was just massive.
Yeah.
So you have to figure that's going to happen, but that's kind of baked into his cost, right? So,
Mhm.
at quarterback 15, I think he's a solid play. You're going to get a guy who's going to be on explosive offense. They're going to score a ton of points. Yes, maybe the defense is going to be a little bit better this year, especially if they get Aaron Donald back out of retirement. But I think he's
Don't put that out there.
I think he's appropriately priced where he's at,
Yeah.
given I think the regression that we're going to see essentially.
I'm glad to know that we're both on the same page with that, and it seems like most of the industry is on the same page of the Stafford regression as well. But at the end of the day, that says QB 15. Like he's outside of the top 100 picks. As much as, I'm gonna get on this show and I'll get on other shows when I'm on other shows and say that obviously this 7.7% touchdown rate has to go down. He still has Devontae Adams to catch touchdown passes. And if you look at this list of players over here on the left, you'll notice that 2 of the highest touchdown pass rate seasons, other than what Stafford just had, included Devontae Adams. So, I mean,
He's
I
the
agree
skeleton
that
key.
yeah. He's the kingmaker. No,
Mhm.
I completely agree that it's gonna go down, but I do believe that he can return better than QB 15 overall value. I would be a little surprised if he didn't finish as a low end QB1. And I think one of the things I like most about the potential of drafting Matthew Stafford is if you're doing what you did a year ago and you're going to load up on running backs and wide receivers, this is a guy who you can take very late in your draft and you know about what he's going to give you. It's probably not going to be the 20 points per game. He's probably going to be a lot closer to, let's say he loses 1 touchdown per game, which is roughly the average of what you were talking about with those other quarterbacks. That's putting him down to, 16 points. And I'm going to assume he's mostly consistent with that just because it's still Puka, it's still Devontae, and we love those guys. We're drafting those guys high. And if we're willing to draft those guys high, the quarterback throwing on the ball, we could probably do worse at QB 15.
No, absolutely. And just real quick, even if he does say fall down to 30, that would have tied him with Dak Prescott this year for 4th most touchdowns in the league passing wise. So, right. So even if he falls back down to that, he's still going to be top 5, top 6 in passing touchdowns.
Right. And depending on your league settings, that could either be like much better than some of the running guys, or it could just be average in line. We'll go ahead and move on, though. I think we're both in agreement that, QB 15, reasonable given what he did last year, and we know that he's not going to be close to that. But that's fine. We've got RB 15 coming up here next. The Rams have a lot of excellent fantasy assets that we're going to get to talk about. Kyren Williams, who has been back-to-back RB 10 in each of the last 2 years, 2025, 2024. Now, his total point per game numbers have declined in each of the last 3 years, which is something definitely worth noting. And it coincides with the drafting of Blake Corum. So 3 years ago, he averaged 21 points per start. You have to leave out the first 2 weeks of when they were still messing with Cam Akers, or maybe there was another guy they were messing with, Darrell Henderson, back in the day. And then he went 18 points, 16 and a half points. And the way he did it, though, I think was very Guillotine friendly. And so on the left of the screen here, for those watching rather than listening, I've got his game log, just his points, his snap share. And even when Blake Corum really started to eat into his work, he was still able to give you a floor. And that's something that I'm always going to get really excited about as a Guillotine guy. The 30 and 40 point weeks, they're cool. They're really fun. Don't get me wrong. But the difference between a 35 point week and a 20 point week is probably like a 4 or 5% chance increase of you not getting eliminated in any given week. I would much rather have someone with the game log on the left than someone a little closer to like the Kenneth Walker game log. And I mean, you had the Kenneth Walker on the chop team, as we were looking at a second ago. Where do you land on Kenneth Walker? How much do you care about Blake Corum coming in here? And does the improved defense maybe give him a little bit more upside just by virtue of hopefully a higher workload?
I could definitely see that. And I think that could help kind of offset what looks like it's going to be a larger snap share for Blake Corum this year, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about closer to, a 50-50 split. I don't know if it'll get quite that close. Corum only played 29% of the snaps last year. But what if that gets to, 40, 42, somewhere around that range this season? What's that going to do, to Kyren Williams' output? Like you talked about, I mean, for some reason, he gets a lot of flack in the fantasy community, but as you mentioned, back-to-back top 10 seasons, he has double-digit touchdowns the last 3 years. He continuously produces. And so, maybe he's not the flashiest or the sexiest guy, but, he's going to put up points for your team. And one thing I like about them is the Rams have a pretty favorable schedule for running backs this season. So Williams is probably going to be another smash play. I think RB15 is probably his floor, even if Corum shoots up a little bit in that snap share. So I think he's a great investment in almost any format.
Yeah. And this is definitely one of my favorite formats to draft him in. I think that the reason that the fantasy community kind of dogs on him is he's boring. Like at the end of the day, as much as I love Kyren Williams, I'm aware that this is for the most part, boring play. He's not super athletic. He's not making a lot of dudes miss. He's not busting long runs. And of course, when people draft Blake Corum, then they're sort of preying on the Kyron Williams downfall. That's going to also contribute to the anti-Kyron Williams conversation. But at the end of the day, I really think it's because it's similar to running back rooms that we've seen in the past, where there's the veteran who's consistent and is better at football than the backup, but the backup comes in with fresher legs as a change of pace guy. And when the defense sees the starter go out, they're not as keyed in on the run. And then the backup looks better. It's like the Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard effect is how I've always described it, is people were clamoring for Tony Pollard. And the second Tony Pollard got his own starting role, we were clamoring for Tyjae Spears to get more work over him, because now that he's a starter, he's boring. And I think that we would probably turn on Blake Corum in a heartbeat if Kyron Williams went down and it was, Blake Corum versus Jarquez Hunter. Jarquez Hunter only needs to break off one 14-yard run, make one dude miss, and people are going to be like, he should be the starter.
Oh, yeah. Fantasy Twitter will lose their mind if that happens.
I mean, for Kyron Williams' sake, I hope it doesn't. But, it'd be kind of funny. But I thoroughly agree with the RB15 price tag being too low. That's a guy who's higher up in my current Guillotine rankings, and he's probably going to get a little bit higher as the season goes on. All right, let's talk about the wide receivers. At wide receiver 2 in ADP, we've got Puka Nacua. He is, I don't know if you knew this, he is plus 5,500 this season to both lead the NFL in reception yards and be arrested on BetMGM, which feels a little short to me, but I don't think I can entirely fade that bet.
I love that there's odds for that, by the way. That's hilarious.
There are not odds for that. I made that up. I'm lying for fun. But that's okay. I think that he's definitely the correct choice to be wide receiver 2. He was the wide receiver 1 in points per game last year. He led the NFL in just about every efficiency metric that you can. It was him and JSN at the top, but one of them played with Sam Darnold, one of them played with Matthew Stafford. So Puka Nacua did lead the NFL in yards per route run, first downs per route run. He led in receptions. He led in target rate. He was the nuclear bomb in the lineup at all times. He only went below 10 PPR points once last season, and that's when he was injured. He is the only player other than Christian McCaffrey to be able to say that as of last year, at least among people who played a full season. Rashee Rice may have also pulled that off, but I don't count him as consistent as those two. So he's my wide receiver 2. I think that he is probably going to continue his insane efficiency and nothing. I thought there was another bullet point that I was going to talk about a little bit, but no.
No, you're good. You're good. You touched on a lot right there. And I agree. Wide receiver 2, that's it for me. I have Chase just above him. And here's why. Chase ran 170 more routes than Puka last year.
Yeah.
Puka had a 69.7% snap share. That was 55th among receivers. Okay. So he's the one coming off the field in these 13 personnel sets that McVay is now, leading the way in the NFL, because Devontae Adams is so good against man coverage, especially down there in the end zone. So that's the only gripe I have with Puka, is he's not an every down player like a guy like Chase or a JSN is. But he's amazing. Like you said, I mean, he is tops in almost any category you can think of in terms of raw production and efficiency metrics. And he's the all-time NFL leader in yards per game. He actually passed Jefferson last year with the bad season that Jefferson had. Yep, he was the leader in that. So Puka averages over 95 yards a game. That's like 5 more than Jefferson. So, whenever he's out there, he's smashing. He's putting up huge numbers. But I agree. He's about as good as you can get at the position.
Yeah, I like what you said. I should have had that in my notes of him coming off the field sometimes, and I worry that we might see more Rams and 13 personnel because we saw more of it in the playoffs. That wasn't something
Hmm.
they were doing for the first 8 or so weeks of the season. It really took until the bye week for them to realize that that's what their personnel made more sense for. And also, if this defense improves, then I could definitely see a world where they're in 13 personnel to run it a lot more so that they can establish the ability to pass out of 13 personnel.
Yeah.
And I mean, Devontae Adams is just going to start over Puka Nacua in those sets. It's not something that you can really have a gripe with Sean McVay about. He's just better in those matchups for, closer to the line of scrimmage sort of plays. If they
Hmm.
were to take a deep shot out of 13 personnel, then you could see maybe them more likely to put Puka on the field, but then they also don't want to show their hand.
Right.
So I think that Jamar Chase is the right pick for the number one wide receiver. There's definitely a world where Puka becomes less consistent. I just don't think we're living in that world.
Agreed.
Next guy, line up across from him, wide receiver 24, Devontae Adams was such a rough guillotine wide receiver last year. He had a great finish to the season, don't get me wrong. And this very brief stretch, I think it was actually just a game and a half that Puka didn't play. He was incredible. But he was very touchdown dependent. He had 4 of his 14 games below 10 PPR points, and he doesn't play enough snaps, I think, to justify someone at wide receiver 24. He had fewer than 800 yards last year. Just about everyone going before and after him, aside from the guys who were hurt, had more than 800 yards last year. If we're going to say Matthew Stafford can't keep up this 7.7% touchdown rate, we need to apply that with a little bit more scrutiny to Devontae Adams, I think. He
Hmm.
scored 14 touchdowns last year, and no one's expecting him to score 14 touchdowns again this year, but I don't think we are fully baking in the implication of that. Because if he's not catching those touchdowns, it's not like he goes from, 790 yards and 14 touchdowns to 790 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, if the touchdowns are going down, the correlation between yards and touchdowns is probably going to imply the yards and receptions also go down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that number is going to go down, just naturally, right? If Stafford doesn't keep it up, then Adams is not going to. And him being the goal line receiver may not be McVay's flavor of the month this year, right? That was
Mhm.
kind of something that he did last year that was, new and exciting. Defenses really weren't ready for that. But they're going to be ready for it this year, right? So I don't know if you're going to be able to catch everybody off guard lining him up one on one and just throwing, fades or quick screens to him and inside the end zone.
Right.
Um, I'm probably going to let others draft Adams. I think he's just been a phenomenal player. Obviously, he's a Hall of Fame talent, and his
Mhm.
efficiency was solid last year. But some of the knacks are basically he doesn't give you any yak anymore. He ranked 73rd among receivers in yards after catch, and his separation metrics were very poor against man coverage. He can't
Mhm.
separate anymore at 33 years old against man coverage. He was better
Yeah.
against zone, right? But at 33 and with the just regression that's coming from your 38-year-old quarterback, I don't see a lot of upside in Devonte Adams. I don't see a world where he suddenly gets back to 1,000 yards to offset the loss of touchdowns. So I'm probably
Mhm.
going to let others draft him and just kind of watch it from afar.
Yeah, the only situation that I want Devonte Adams on my team in a guillotine league is if I already have Puka Nacua, and you can't do that from the draft. Devonte Adams at wide receiver 24, he's going at an ADP of 48th overall right now, give or take. So if you take Puka Nacua with pick number 4 or 5, excuse me, something up there. then by the time it gets back around to you, you're picking at 34 and you're picking at 40. Unless you're gonna reach to add Devontae Adams to Puka Nacua, you're probably just not gonna be able to draft him, and so I don't know the situation that Devontae Adams ends up on one of my guillotine teams, and I think odds are he just doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. I
And
agree. Let
I would
somebody else
recommend he
grab them.
probably doesn't end up on one of yours either. He has
Hmm.
fun weeks, he has big touchdown scoring weeks, but I would just rather have, like, I mean, I wouldn't actually rather have Wandale Robinson than him, but, like, the Wandale Robinson-esque guy who's going to catch, you know, 7 or 8 balls and do nothing with it. There's not a lot of guys like that. Man, maybe I would take Wandale Robinson over Devontae Adams. I'm not gonna come to a conclusion on that on this show, but I might. I might
I
do it
like
just to be
Wandale.
controversial.
It could be a good year for him. So
Yeah, I've got him in my top 70, and I'm already feeling a little bit nervous about that. Um, anyways, we're gonna pretend that Terrence Ferguson matters for a few seconds. Tight end 28, just because he's the highest rank in ADP. Look, he's close to free. If you're drafting him, it's probably not a bad pick. There's nothing wrong with it. He just caught 11 balls last season, which is I get it. It's 11 more than me and you, but it's like 80 fewer than guys who were going a couple of rounds before him. And like uh well, I guess Mason Taylor had a dude drafted right on top of him. Bad example. Point being though, he's not even the best tight end whose last name is Ferguson.
that's
Like
true.
he is a yards after catch, he is a deep threat tight end. You're never gonna start this guy.
No, probably not. Basically, the way it breaks down is the whole tight end room for the Rams is almost their third receiver. Okay,
Mhm.
but the problem is they divvy that up amongst three or four guys, and
Yeah.
so none of them are really going to be super reliable. Ferguson's obviously, the one with the draft capital, second round draft capital last year, and he's good at what he does. He's a seam buster, downfield threat. He
Mhm.
did lead all tight ends in deep targets last year uh,
Yeah.
with 14, right? So that tells you how McVay wants to use him. But obviously, when you're a high A dot guy like that, you're not going to be getting any easy button targets. You're going to have a
Mhm.
lot of bust weeks. And so, unless he takes like a massive leap this year and kind of puts Higby and Parkinson, on the bench, I'm not seeing a world where Ferguson is really going to be a great fantasy pick, let alone for something
Mhm.
like Guillotine, where you don't want those bust weeks.
Totally. I think the best case scenario for him involves someone in the passing game getting hurt and him also taking a step forward. And by the time someone gets hurt and by the time we realize he's taken a step forward, it's probably week 6, it's week 7, and there's 10 to 12 better tight ends than him anyways that we can say for certain right
Hmm.
now. And so you're just not drafting a guy who has a chance to make it into a starting lineup because by the time you would feel confident in starting him, he's not good enough to be started. And that's something I say about a handful of players. You're probably going to hear me say it about a couple of more guys here. Not on this slide, but going forward on some of these next ones. Um, let's talk about some bums on the Rams before we finish up with these. Wide receiver 114, Kanata Mumfield. I the only notes I have on him, I forgot I wrote that. That was funny. I cannot bring myself to draft a guy named after a field of mumps. It sounds awful. And I stand by what I said. You mentioned Colby Parkinson earlier. I would rather draft Colby Parkinson than Terrence Ferguson. Sure. He caught 8 touchdowns last season. I know that we're still tied into the Matthew Stafford threw too many touchdown passes last season, but I mean that's 3 fewer catches than that's 3 fewer touchdowns than Ferguson had regular catches.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why he's tied in 30.
Yeah, it's not nothing, right? He had a pretty good season. I think the funny thing with Parkinson was, he had that hot streak toward the end, and then when everybody in fantasy was like, "Start Kobe Parkinson," he laid an egg, right? And
Yeah,
that, of course, that was going to happen when everybody jumps on somebody like that.
right.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, there's worse guys late in drafts that you could take shots on, I think, than a guy attached to Stafford who scored 8 touchdowns last year. So
yeah, Kobe Parkinson. If I completely punt the tight end position, which I've done a couple of times in the past, and I've always sort of regretted it, so I don't recommend completely punting the tight end position. But if you find yourself in that situation, if you just can't keep passing up on the values you're getting and you just end up without a tight end, Colby Parkinson, last round pick. I can see it. And then obviously at RB37, the only guy on this slide that's worth talking about and the only guy on this slide that will be started in guillotine formats ever, Blake Corum. We've got to make up our mind as an industry, as a team. The Rams need to make up their mind as well on Blake Corum. I'm not anti Blake Corum. He was bad as a rookie. He was fine last year. I think that he's probably just going to be a change of pace back or a grind it out when the Rams have a 30-point lead type of guy. I wish he weren't being drafted at RB37. I don't think it makes sense for him to be drafted at RB37. I don't think he has the week-to-week upside or that a lot of other players going around him have. In fact, while you talk for a second, I'm going to go ahead and look at where he is on Fantasy Pros.
Yeah, no, of course. And you know, I will say I don't mind Corum as a player, as a back. Like you said, his upside is lacking, especially if Kyron's going to be healthy, right? I think a lot of people are kind of drafting Corum with this assumption that, okay, maybe this is the year that Kyron Williams suffers an injury, because he has been he's a small back and he's been very healthy for the last 3 years. So, but with Corum, you know, he is an effective early down runner. He averaged 5.1 yards per carry last year. He actually ranked second in Player Profiler's explosive play rating. So that kind of tells you that he has some breakaway ability there. And he was fifth in EPA. So, you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, if Kyron goes down, Corum's going to the moon, right? Like he's going to be highly sought after, but you can't rely on that. So, you know, at best, like you said, he's maybe a flex play if the Rams are like, you know, double digit, favorites or something like that.
So I have him myself ranked at RB41. I want to be a little lower on him just because I know he's in a good offense, but there are guys going after him who I think are better week to week. In fact, on Fantasy Pros, the next 5 picks, Jared Goff, who I'm a fan of, I think he's a good late quarterback. Rashad White and Aaron Jones, who I would much rather have starting in my RB2 slot than Blake Corum. Jaden Reed, fun upside shot at receiver, and Kyler Murray. Like, all of those guys should definitely be going before Blake Corum in this format. If you're playing a best ball league, that's something completely different, because Blake Corum does have the upside to, you know, be the guy if something were to happen to Kyron Williams. But for the type of fantasy football we're playing here, it's not a great pick. He's fine if you already have Kyron Williams and you want to like insulate the whole backfield, but not even at the RB37 price tag. You can do that with other backfields for cheaper. And if you want to take the shot, and if you want to take a shot at a backup running back, we're talking about San Francisco next. Draft Jordan James, like 50 picks later.
Well, except for he just fractured his rib. So the only problem with that is he's going to be out for a little bit, right? So maybe now that's draft Kylan Black.
I can't myself to do that. I can't draft Kylan back. All right. The San Francisco 49ers at QB 12 to start us off, Brock Purdy. This is another great late quarterback. Like I've been going back and forth on every show that I've done so far, truly, because I've always been anti the conventional wisdom of, you know, the industry likes late quarterbacks. And I want to have someone who I'm a little bit more confident in. I want to know I've got 20 points in that spot come week 1. But man, Brock Purdy at QB 12, this is a guy who's He's always been a top 10 quarterback per game, QB6,
Mhm.
QB10, QB5. I mean, he's in a great offense, depending on if everyone gets injured, because I know that we're 2 days into training camp and they've had 3 offensive skill players get injured. They've had his coach
Mhm.
get injured, and there's an argument that there are too many white skill position players on this team for them to continue the efficiency that they've had. With all due respect to George Kittle and to Christian McCaffrey and, um, oh, I'm blanking on his name, Pearsall.
Use check too.
Juszczyk still
Yeah.
there.
Those guys are
Jake
ballers though,
Tonges.
man.
Yeah. Um,
No, dude, I agree. I love Purdy. He's a guy that I really hammer home in drafts, no matter the format, because he just goes too late for what he produces. You
mhm,
talked about the top 10 finishes. I got something better for you, right? Since he became the starter in
okay.
2023, there's only been 3 guys who averaged more fantasy points per game than Brock Purdy. It's Josh Allen,
Mhm.
it's Lamar Jackson, it's Jalen Hurts.
So
That's it,
ooh,
right? Those
okay.
are the only 3 guys who average more points than Brock Purdy in fantasy football.
I love
So,
when someone brings a better stat than I
yeah,
do.
it's but dude, that's awesome, right? And you're continuously getting this guy in the teens every
Yeah.
year just because he was
Mhm.
drafted as the final pick a few years ago, right? Well,
Right.
that doesn't matter anymore, right?
Mhm.
He's in an explosive offense. He's tied to Kyle Shanahan, and he's accurate, man. He dices up man coverage. He has excellent deep touch. He ranked
Mhm.
first in deep ball completion percentage, and he ranked first again in completion percentage against man coverage last year. So he's going to put the ball where it needs to go. He also has some sneaky rushing upside, which is nice
Mhm.
too. He's going to get you a couple hundred yards, a few touchdowns. So you know, as long as he continues to do that and he's tied to this offense, he's always going to be one of my favorite targets in drafts, no matter the format, because he's very consistent and dependable and he's going to put up points.
Yeah. The only holdup I would have drafting Brock Purdy late is if I had already drafted a 49er. Like, if I have Christian McCaffrey or if I have Mike Evans on my team, I don't think I can bring myself to inject that much variance onto a guillotine squad,
Yeah.
especially to start the year. Um, and the other thing that I could see myself passing on him for is the dudes that go immediately after him. And I pasted this onto the slides as well. There's a couple of guys who I'm just really excited about. You've got Josh Downs, you got Jacoby Myers, Mekhi Lemon down there. And then also Patrick Mahomes and Bo Nix are going after him. So
Hmm.
I could see myself looking at that range of quarterbacks if I don't have one and saying, okay, I'm pretty sure one of them's going to make it back to me after a turn or something like that, and then passing on it. But for what it's worth, Patrick Mahomes and Bo Nix play each other week 1, and I really don't wanna have to go into that matchup being like, "All right, I just need Bo Nix to get 22 fantasy points on the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Monday
That's a
Night
tough
Football,
one.
no problem, no sweat." Uh,
Hmm.
like, psychologically, I don't know if I could make that one happen for myself.
No, I get it.
But that's just an area of the draft where I think there's a lot of good values. Fortunately for Brock Purdy, I would imagine the Downs, the Myers, the Mekhi Lemons, I think they're probably going to get pushed up the draft boards as we get closer uh,
Hmm.
to the season. Let's move on to running back number 3. This is my RB2, by the way, Christian McCaffrey. I'm definitely taking him over Jahmyr Gibbs. I I
Ooh,
saw
okay.
Jahmyr Gibbs have too many below 10-point games last year. He had some of the best fantasy games as an individual as well, but again, that's just not something that gets as rewarded in this format. You're rewarded for not getting last. That's it. And as long as McCaffrey's playing, it's gonna be pretty hard for you to get last. Um,
Hmm.
he touched the ball a lot last season, and he had his career low in yards per carry last season. It's not a great combination, but it's also Christian McCaffrey, and he also catches the ball a ton.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are we at here?
You're going to have to kind of weigh your risk tolerance when it comes to McCaffrey, right? Kind of like I did last year when I took him at 9. Obviously, he's going to be a little bit
Mhm.
more expensive this year, but yeah, 450 touches. That's not great. The last 2 times he led the NFL in touches. The next season, he missed massive chunks,
Yep,
and that kills you, right? And so
100%.
now he's 30 years old. He has over 2,400 career touches. Scary numbers if you're if
Yeah.
you're a if you're a McCaffrey manager.
Mhm.
But he's also basically the running back version of Josh Allen in the sense that when he's healthy, he's either going to be running back 1 or running back 2 in fantasy points. And he's done that every
Yeah.
season that he's been healthy since 2018. Okay. So, like we talked about at the top, he's the ultimate cheat code. He's
Mhm.
probably the best receiving back in NFL history because the guy just topped 100 catches for the 3rd time, which is absurd as a running
It's
back,
so insane.
right? It's ridiculous. So, the only holdup is with him is obviously is the touches. Can he stay healthy? The guy is a physical specimen, and he obviously takes care of himself. But obviously, time catches up to everybody. That beating as a running back catches up to you at some point, and so hopefully that's not this year. It will at some point, but when he's healthy, there's nobody better at fantasy than Christian McCaffrey.
100%.
Hmm.
The other stat that I had pulled in here that I thought was very relevant for Guillotine leagues, he only had 2 games last season all year. He played every game, which I would not have guessed he would do.
Right.
In only 2 of those games, he scored below 17 PPR points. 17 is an insane floor.
Hmm.
Like, if you know that you're rolling in with at least that many points out of your RB1, and obviously the potential for him to be your RB1 and your RB2 with change at the end of it. It's so hard for me to pass on that. Age, touches, health concerns, all valid, all taken into account. It's just
Yeah.
safe when he's alive, and
Hmm.
when he's healthy, he's gonna keep you alive, is what I meant to say. If he gets injured, you're looking at a dicey week when he gets injured, and obviously it sucks that you no longer have Christian McCaffrey, but it's not like a season-long redraft league where now I'm looking at a bunch of, "Oh, am I starting Justice Hill off the waiver wire?" Like, there's good options on the waiver wire in Guillotine,
Yeah.
so I think the flexibility in a Guillotine league also makes him a better pick.
Yes.
Because if something happens, your ability to pivot is way better than if you're in, a 14 team league with super flex deep benches and it's like, all right, time to go add Jaleel McLaughlin to the squad and hope he pulls through for me.
Yeah. As long as you don't do what I did last year and blow 85% week 1.
Right. There's gotta be a
Yep.
gotta be a limit. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the wide receivers. We've got, believe it or not, the healthy of the 2 wide receivers is 33-year-old Mike Evans. Um, in line with the Devontae Adams discussion, from earlier, when a wide receiver shows you that they're washed, just in my opinion, you should just believe them the first time. Don't don't give them the opportunity to show you again. And I don't think I'm gonna let Mike Evans show me again this year. Think wide receiver 25 is fine. I'm probably not gonna end up with him. I think there's a few more players at around there, um, who I'm gonna lean towards. I'm probably gonna be taking a running back, honestly, if he's at the top of the board and the other wide receivers don't appeal to me that much. Um, I don't like drafting super old players, especially when they're on new teams, and I just didn't see anything last year to give me confidence either, and I think that was the big thing for me is he was up and down and injured, and now he's on a new team playing a role that we don't know, and that scares me. I don't wanna start in week 1.
Yeah. I'm going to push back a little bit, and I don't know if you can see it, but for those of you listening, I am wearing kind of a throwback Bucks shirt, right? That's I'm a Bucks fan.
Mhm.
So I do still think Evans has a little bit of juice left to squeeze out of him. Um, he could have easily stayed here in Tampa, but he seemed motivated signing with the 49ers. And so I think there's something there with him.
Okay.
That team is good, and they're still in a Super Bowl window. So I think that's what's going to be what he's chasing there. But Fantasy Points has a great stat. They call it
Mhm.
average separation score, and they have Mike Evans still as wide receiver one in average separation score over the past 3 years. Those guys are really sharp over there, so I'm not going to question that.
Mhm.
But I think what kind of excites me this year with Evans joining up with Purdy is that accuracy and that deep ball placement that we talked about earlier with Purdy, where he's so good at that. He's at the top of the league when it comes to those metrics. And that's going to coalesce well with Evans's game downfield. We know he's a great vertical threat. He's one of the top 10 touchdown scorers in NFL history at the position.
Mhm.
He's a beast inside the end zone. So as long as those hammies can stay healthy and he can stay on the field, I think he'll have a pretty good season. But there obviously is some risk with him with the age, very much like Devontae Adams.
Mhm. Do Are you concerned at all about the hamstrings being this close in proximity to the notorious electrical substation of the San Francisco 49ers?
I knew that was coming. Well, the way it's already taken down Christian Kirk and Ricky Pearsall, he
Yeah.
may not even, these guys might not even be healthy here in a couple weeks. But um, no, it's the substation thing is so funny to me, and I love that now. Just guys are getting injured 2 days into
Mhm.
camp, and the jokes are already starting.
Right. That was one of my favorite jokes from last season. I'm glad that it carried forward so forcefully already,
Hmm.
um, into this season. I will say, though, yeah, if Christian Kirk and Ricky Pearsall stay injured, I'm gonna change my tune very quickly on Mike Evans. If
Yeah,
he's battling with Demarcus Robinson and, oh god, who would even be their wide receiver 5 at that point? I don't know. But yeah, if that's his competition for targets, then you can sign me up for Mike Evans all day.
right.
Ricky Pearsall, he is
Ugh.
not shot yet. No one has shot this man before the season. Um, he was a very popular breakout candidate 2 years in a row, as a rookie coming into the NFL. He, people liked him a lot, and then, he got shot. And so that didn't work out super well. And then last season as well, people were hoping that, oh, it's the Shanahan offense. There's no Ayuk. It might be time. And then he got injured yet again. And now he's got red letters next to his name for the
Mhm.
third time in as many years. And I'm starting I'm starting to look at the guys who are getting drafted around him. I talked
Yep.
about it a little bit earlier because he's getting drafted close to Brock Purdy, but Josh Downs above him, Mekhi Lemon below him, J.K. Dobbins a little farther down the list. And I'm a lot more confident that those guys are playing week one than I am on Ricky Pearsall. Um, where do you think Ricky Pearsall slots in? Let's say he's healthy though. Let's say that he's starting week one at wide receiver 44. Do you feel confident in probably putting him in your flex spot for a guillotine league? This would probably be your top flex in an 18 man.
So I was ready to come on here and kind of sing Ricky Pearsall's praises a little bit. Tell you that he started the year last season very sharp. He was putting up
He
some
did.
nice numbers.
Mhm.
He's a really good man beater. He was 10th in yards per route run versus man, top 20 in first downs per route one run. All nice metrics that point to really kind of elite wide receivers. And then he's injured again
Yeah.
already, right? So, that's the thing with Ricky. I think he's a good talent, and we had no way of knowing this was going to happen. The guy wasn't injured in college ever,
No.
right? So
Yeah,
this
he
is
never missed a game.
this is all new, unfortunately, for Ricky Pearsall. And it sucks because I think the guy does have some talent. I think he's definitely due for some touchdown regression. He didn't score last year. So, that's not going to happen again if he's healthy.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's, in this type of format where you can't have zeros, they're already talking about knee swellness and the team's worried. You may just have to just take Ricky Pearsall off your board completely here soon, if
Mhm.
we're not getting favorable, injury updates with him.
Yeah. My hope for drafting Ricky Pearsall is that no one else drafts him, and then he is the first player on my bench. I
Yeah,
would be
just kind
fine
of
with that.
tumbles.
Right, and then hope that, 4 weeks into the season, he comes off the pup, or maybe he doesn't even start on the pup, but a few weeks in, I feel confident starting him over whoever I drafted that I was completely wrong about and sucks and is terrible. So, I was also completely ready to come on and say that, like, yeah, Ricky Pearsall's going to be a really good bargain. I like
Mhm.
first downs per route run. That's one of my favorite efficiency stats because
Yeah.
Um, those if you're getting the first downs, it means that you're not just spam kind of gimmicky targets. That's real wide receiver running real wide receiver routes. And he was 18th in the NFL last year in
Mhm.
first downs per route run. At wide receiver 44, that's good. He's just got red letters next to his name. And that's kind of one of the big no-nos in guillotine fantasy football. Anyway, speaking of red letters next to his name, we've got George Kittle at tight end 10, who pretty bad injury late last year. He says he's going to play week 1. He was the tight end 3 per game last season. Unfortunately, he also missed time last season as well. The good thing I think about this though is Jake Tonges was really good when
Yes.
Kittle was absent last season. And I think that Jake Tonges, a younger player, probably getting better and probably worth a draft pick in any format, but I definitely want to throw the dart at him in a guillotine format because what if George Kittle is a little slow to pick it up?
Mhm.
What if he doesn't go on the pup, but he doesn't really play the first couple of weeks? Then you're really sitting on something there. And we'll talk about Tonjes a little later. But at tight end 10, this is pumping the brakes tremendously. As consistently as he's been able to score 15 points per game, no matter what, um, he's just not been he's just not been on the field enough, and that's a guy with red letters next to his name is not someone I want to start week 1. It's not someone I want to start, period, but especially going into it when you've got a plethora of options, you can just look a little bit farther down the board, click on Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, yeah. He's going to have to fall a little bit in order for me to feel comfortable taking him. Now, that may change if we get some extremely favorable updates, later on in
Sure.
training camp, right? Reassuring us that, he's not going to start the season on the pup list, that he's going to be available. I don't mind if he misses week 1 because I think they're traveling international that first game.
Mhm.
So they may just decide, hey, we don't want to put you through that stress, take that first week off,
Yep.
start the season week 2, right? Um, but yeah, at tight end 10, it's a little expensive for me, especially, if he was 25, I wouldn't be so worried about it. But Kittle's what,
Sure.
32, going on 33. He's
Mhm.
on the older side. So, yes, he may bounce back from the overall injury quickly, but there's no guarantee that he's the same awesome top 3 in every metric George Kittle that we're so used to year in
True.
and year out with him. So yeah, I agree. I think he's gonna have to fall a little bit for me to make sense in guillotine leagues for me to take George Kittle.
Mhm. Yeah, probably gonna have to be outside of the top 130, 140 picks, for him to end up on one of my teams. Let's talk about some Niners. Ignore, the bottom left. I realized this earlier today. In my head, the image in the bottom left was Brandon Ayuk. It was not Juwan Jennings, but it is in fact Juwan Jennings down
Juwan
there.
Jennings, that high top fade, man. Oh,
Yeah, naturally. Thank you, Cantaloupe, for that lovely image. That was great. Let's start with Tonjes. We've talked a little bit about him already. Um, he's going to be startable if the situation like what you talked about, if George Kittle is not playing week 1 and you drafted Jake Tonjes at tight end 38, that's free. That might not even be a guy who you need to spend a draft pick on. That might be someone who you pick up because you moved someone to an IR slot immediately after the draft. And then you've got someone scoring a lot of points week 1. You can, if your league allows trades, which it should, Guillotine leagues should definitely allow trades. It's way more fun. You would be able to sell that guy. You'd be able to get a good chunk of change in exchange for someone who's got, maybe Kenyon Sadiq, and they're like, maybe a rookie on the Jets is not who I want to put my faith in to start this all off. DeJon Stribling at wide receiver 82. We can talk a little bit more about this. I feel like everyone's got a DeJon Stribling take. What's yours?
Yeah, well, that wide receiver 82 is gonna shoot up now, right? With these injuries. So expect to be taking Stribling way earlier than that. He's gonna get a chance now, right? Because if Pearsall's hurt, and Christian Kirk is hurt, right? Like you mentioned, you struggled to name another receiver. I can't. I think they have like Jacob Cowling maybe still on the roster.
Yep.
But I mean, he's not going to do anything. So, I think there's going to be a little bit of, hey, we want to prove that we knew what we were doing when we took this guy, number 33 overall in the NFL draft, and they're going to put him out there. Yeah, for sure. And, he had some good numbers in college. He had back-to-back seasons, I think over 800 yards. Was able to put up close to 15 touchdowns in 2 seasons, his last 2 seasons. And he's got really good speed. He ran a sub 4.4 40 at the combine. So he's physical. He can do some of the things that Shanahan likes on the outside when it comes to blocking and stuff. But I also think he's got the yak ability if they want to get him the ball in space to be able to kind of break some tackles, make a couple guys miss. And he has the speed to do those things. So he's intriguing to me now that there's kind of a runway for him to see some playing time.
Yeah, and when I made the slides for this episode and I didn't have time to update them, I didn't know that they were going to be down a couple of wide receivers. I'm on the same page of I think that he has a greater opportunity now, and I think the Niners are absolutely going to give him the opportunity because we've seen this time and time again with basically every team in the NFL. Even if they've made a bad draft pick, they're going to put that pick on the field to try to prove themselves right. And I'm not even certain that DeJon Stribling is a bad pick. I think that, he was a high pick relative to consensus, obviously. But he can still be a good football player. And good football players, when given opportunities, make things happen. Now, I'm not going to start him week 1, but at wide receiver 82, I'm kind of fine not starting him week 1.
Yeah.
The only thing is with rookies, I feel like it's really hard to be willing to let them go if we're 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the season and he hasn't shown us anything really. If he's been doing like 8 points here, 9 points there, 2 points here, 3 points there, something like that, you definitely can't start him. And then in a guillotine format where you're constantly churning guys off of the waiver wire, I worry that in that situation, I wouldn't want to drop him because he has the opportunity and because I believe that he does have talent and the team obviously believes in him. I wouldn't want to drop him, and I worry that he just becomes an anchor weighing down the rest of my roster that could be a spot to pick up someone more important.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That makes sense.
But if you're gonna draft DeJon Stribling, you have to be committed to dropping DeJon Stribling if given the necessity to do so. And then I don't think we have to talk super long about backup running backs. Whichever one's healthy, draft him. It's going to be a great value.
Yeah, like we said, 450 touches for CMC. So if you get him, please, I like him. I'm imploring all of my followers online, take the backup if you have
Take
CMC,
any and
please.
all backup. It is worth 2 it's worth 2 roster spots early in the season, I promise.
Yes, yes.
All right, 3rd most interesting team in this division, maybe the 1st most interesting team after the training camp reports from today, the Arizona Cardinals. We're not gonna talk about Jacoby Brissett, are we? This just isn't a
No.
he's I'll say exactly one thing about Jacoby Brissett. The first 6 weeks, he plays 6 teams that I think are gonna make the playoffs. He plays 6 teams that are favored to make the playoffs in Vegas. It's gonna be abysmal, not remotely close to a startable Guillotine asset.
No,
Moving
I
on.
agree.
Yeah,
It's unless you're in a super flex format, and that's not Guillotine,
yeah.
you're not playing Brissett.
Okay. I've considered, though, I'm gonna make a league this year. I don't know what league it is, but I'm gonna make 17 of you fuckers do a Guillotine super flex,
Oh
and I'm gonna
god,
see what happens. I have
that's
no
gonna be a
idea what's gonna
bloodbath.
happen. It's gonna be disgusting. Maybe we'll do that in League 7. I'll
That would
consider
be
it.
fun. Let me know. I would be interested just for
Okay.
the sheer the fun of that. So that would be fun.
I'm certain that we can find 16 other people who are sick in the head and are willing to do that. All right.
I like it.
Anyways, RB13, Jeremiah Love. God, I hate the Arizona Cardinals. Why?
Hmm.
Why did they do this? God, I love Jeremiah Love. He's so good. He runs and it's like you're watching a knife cut through butter. And now he's on the worst team that we've seen in at least since this decade started. This is probably going to be the worst team since we heard the words Corona 19 or COVID 19, coronavirus. God, how did I mess that up? That's embarrassing. Uh, Look, he was the 3rd overall pick. And 3rd overall picks or any rookie running back drafted in the top 10 in the last 15 years has produced like a fantasy RB1. Even Ashton Genty last year, because he stayed healthy, because he kept producing, and because he dropped like 40 points on the Houston Texans for some reason, finished as an
Yeah,
RB1.
go figure.
Yeah. And then you
Yep.
started him next week against, I think it was the Giants. He played the Giants the next week and he was awful. He scored like
Hmm.
8 points. Ugh. Not the point. The point is, historically, it has been a safe bet. He's going at RB13. He should finish around there because even Ashton Genty last year, who finished at RB11 or 12, I don't remember exactly. Um, Even then, that was like the worst case scenario. The other guys who were getting drafted this high in the 1st round, you're talking Christian McCaffrey, you're talking Leonard Fournette, you're talking Ezekiel Elliott, you're talking Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Actually, Jahmyr Gibbs was 12th overall. But point still being, when a running back gets drafted this high, they tend to not mess around with the James Conner, Tyler Algiers of the world, regardless of what Nathaniel Hackett has to say. It's just the team is so bad.
Hmm.
This team is so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
you're right. I love him as a prospect. I think he's a super exciting prospect. He was a high school track champion in the 100-meter. So the guy has like legit straight line speed. And his skill set does fit this modern NFL, right? He's got great hands, very good receiving ability.
Mhm,
The explosiveness is there when he gets the ball in his hands into the open field. He's going to make guys miss. So he has that every down skill set that I think is going to make him a stud. Now, like we talked about, like you just said, they're not favored in a game this year
nope,
based on Vegas odds, right? So it's going to be very tough for him, especially if they're talking about, or if they're going to do what they're talking about, and that's give James Conner the ball. Obviously they signed Tyler Algier in the offseason, and I think he's a decent player, and they're going to give him the ball a little bit between the 20s, and he's going to be
mhm,
kind of a pain in the butt near the red zone and take some touchdowns away from Love. Those are going to hurt him a little bit. I think RB13 this year as a rookie with this team could be his ceiling. So I,
mhm.
I I think he's a little bit overpriced. I kind of have him more as a mid-range RB2.
Yeah.
But that could go up if they're just trailing all the time and Brissett just ends up dumping off the ball to him several times a
Mhm.
game and he racks up 60, 70 catches. So I don't hate him at his cost, but I think that's more of his ceiling than his floor, basically.
Yeah, I'm really on board with that. I think that it's like you said, he's such a great talent, and he's going to have explosive weeks because he's so fast. He's going to have a week probably in the first half of the season. He's going to rip 2 long touchdown runs, and I'm going to have someone in my DMs or in my comments being like, "Why'd you fade Jeremiah Love?" And it's because the week after that he's going to go for 4.3 points.
Hmm.
And this isn't the format for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the Cardinals are not favored, like you said, in any of their games this season, and we're kind of counting on them to do things. Like,
Hmm.
I know that they PPR scammed their way to a lot of points last season, but, like, if we wanna go the Vegas odds route, I'll do you one better. They are in the bottom 5 projected scoring offenses by Vegas point spreads for all of
Yeah.
these games this year. We cannot be drafting Jeremiah Love as a borderline RB1, Trey McBride as the tight end 1, and a couple of relevant wide receivers for what is statistically expected by people who are way smarter than you and me, respectfully, to be I lost exactly how I was gonna finish that sentence, I'm gonna be so honest. I
No,
don't
you're
like it.
good. You're good.
That's the point. The point is I don't like it.
It's something has to give, right? Either they're going to be better than expected or we're just severely overdrafting these guys. And so I think fantasy managers need to have a little bit of caution with some of
Mhm.
these skill position guys. I think as individuals, they're really good,
Yeah.
but the sum of the whole as the team with the Cardinals, it could get ugly.
I think it will get ugly, and I've said this about teams in the past. I don't think I've said this about anyone this year yet. Um, there are several busts on this team. I don't know who they are. We can guess at who they are. I don't wanna put my skin on finding out. I would rather draft
Yeah.
dudes that don't have ARI next to their name. I would rather draft guys with DET or GB or any team that is projected to win a game, please. I would like that. All right. Let's talk about wide receiver 31, Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the training camp highlights, lowlights, if you will. Um, we might look back on this a year from now and be like, yeah, we probably should have known that the guy who was not great for his first 2 seasons and then looks like he didn't know exactly what was going on in training camp was going to be a bad pick in fantasy, especially given the offensive environment that we've already bemoaned.
Right.
Um, but also, like this, his name is Marvin Harrison Jr. That doesn't it doesn't mean nothing. I know that people make fun of it, but that doesn't mean nothing. He was a very high draft pick. A lot of people said he was the best wide receiver prospect they had seen for a while,
Yeah.
probably since Jamar Chase was the most common name that I heard getting thrown out there. Um, but this guy to me feels more like a gamble. The other wide receivers that are going around him, you've got Cortland Sutton happening there. He's not a gamble. You know what Cortland Sutton's going to do. It's not going to flash anything. It's not going to blow you away. But if you're drafting Marvin Harrison Jr., you're betting that you are right about him. And if you're
Yeah.
right, that's great because he's probably going to be great. But you don't have to bet necessarily. Like if you're drafting Cortland Sutton, you're not making really a bet. You're taking what you close to know. And I feel like we know very little about Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you have high hopes for Harrison at wide receiver 31, or is this a big red flag?
I do. So I'm still kind of a Marv truther, I will
Mhm.
say. I do think that he is better than what we've seen these first 2 seasons.
Mhm.
But yes, these low lights, and I say that, and today there's actually a really good couple clips of him cooking some DBs and making some fantastic catches. So
Yeah.
it just kind of seems that like he's in his own head a little bit on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis on, am I going to be really good today? Am I not going to be good? Um, and I don't know. I mean, yes, he was a phenomenal prospect and he put up huge numbers at Ohio State. But
Mhm.
let's be real. I mean, as you mentioned, his name's Marvin Harrison. His dad's a Hall of Famer. He really didn't have to be challenged much growing up until he got to the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think he realized that it's not as easy as it was, coming up through high school and college.
Mhm.
So I still think that there is a level to his game that he hasn't reached yet. And I hope that this new staff moves him around the formation and gets him some layup targets because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think he had like a 2% motion rate last year. And that's insane. We all know
Yeah.
that like motion and getting moved across the field creates
Mm.
mismatches on defense. But when you stick a guy on the outside and you don't ever do anything with them, defenses know that. And so everything with Marvin Harrison these first 2 years has been like down the field, contested catch stuff. And he can do that. But I mean, the guy was the number 4 pick in the draft. Let's get him some easy button stuff. Let's get his confidence up. And I'm hoping that this new staff does that. And if they do, I do think that there's maybe some mid-level wide receiver 2 output within reach for him.
Yeah. I can see that. I think that there might even be like a lower level wide receiver 1 possibility if the offense decides that that's what they're going to do. I think he's got the talent for it. I like what you said about him. Probably, I hadn't even considered that he hadn't faced adversity at all until he got into the NFL. Like, he was probably going to a very good prep high school where, I mean, his family can obviously afford it. And he was always like, he was tall, he was yoked when he was younger
Yeah.
and obviously fast. And so he just nuked everyone on the field. Then he went to Ohio State, where wide receivers just always happen, always thrive. And psychologically, I can see, it being the NFL just not being something that he's used to or had
Right.
developed a way of working with. And I also like that you pointed out that some of the like there are a lot of good clips of Marvin Harrison Jr. today in training
Yeah.
camp as well. Um,
Absolutely.
and the ones that are especially getting pushed out by like the shitty NFL aggregator accounts of him not catching passes and then Michael Wilson catching the passes right after him. Those were not the same throws. Those were not
Right.
even
No,
close to the same
absolutely
throws.
not.
I was talking to my friends about it, and I was like, you know how when you're playing golf and you hit a really bad shot, and then you just take a ball out of your pocket and you set it down, and then you hit it again, and it's perfect. It's because the second guy's good. Once you've got the
Hmm.
first one out of your head, once you know what's happening, the second guy's good. And Marvin Harrison was the first guy running these drills.
Yeah.
It's not like
So,
he was catching
some of those
passes
balls
from.
were not even close either.
No,
So that's not on Marv.
I agree. But most of the he's sort of Gabe Davis-esque. I don't wanna go as far, he's much better than Gabe Davis, but, like, for fantasy, for guillotine leagues in the sense that, like, half of the time he was below 8 PPR points last season,
Yeah.
and the other half of the time he was in the 14 plus point range. So it's not someone who I feel like is going to give me a good floor week to week, and so there's other guys at that pick slot that I'm gonna be clicking on instead.
Yeah.
And then a little bit behind him at wide receiver 41, who we've talked about a little bit, Michael Wilson, who was obviously excellent last year. He was excellent, not based on efficiency. He was not an efficient wide receiver.
No.
He was a excellent wide receiver based on volume, and he cannot possibly have more volume than he had in the second half of last year. There is no world where they are throwing that many passes. I know that they're going to be projected to lose games, but it was just such a perfect storm of things happening for Michael Wilson. I think he's going to get paid a lot this offseason because of what we saw last year, but wide receiver 41 is, I think, a pretty reasonable price tag for a guy who was not a good separator at all. Fantasy points, average separation, didn't like him. He wasn't a great contested catch guy. And if you're not separating and if you're not making contested catches, why were you scoring so many points? It's because they just kept throwing and they can't.
Yep. Yeah. They were chucking it all over the place last year. Only Jamar Chase ran more routes than Michael Wilson last year. And
He was
as you
doing
mentioned,
routes.
yeah,
I
that
didn't
was
know that
it.
he was second in routes. Wow.
Yeah, second in routes. He had over 600 routes run last year, so only second to Chase there. And as you said, the under the hood metrics were not good. Everything was propped up by that volume. So I don't have a lot to add on what you touched on. I think everybody kind of knows that that's what fueled Michael Wilson's just crazy finish last year. But as you said, as a wide receiver 4 at cost, he's not bad.
No.
They will be throwing a lot this year. It's just not going to be at that insane high clip. So I don't mind taking a shot on him as a wide receiver 4, but if he starts creeping up into that 35, 36 wide receiver range, I'll probably pass on him there.
I think the best situation for drafting Michael Wilson is you're at like probably the 5-6 turn and Marvin Harrison's still on the board, and you take Marvin Harrison Jr. and then you add Michael Wilson to him on the way back around. And then you're going to be looking at a good chunk of the Cardinals passing.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'm obviously no big Jacoby Brissett fan, but in terms of like having a solid PPR floor in your Guillotine league between like your wide receiver 2 and your top flex, you can do a lot worse. I think these are probably going to be 2 guys that are up and down throughout the year, and most of the time when one of them's up, the other one's going to be down. And so just having them both, that's probably a floor of 18 points between the 2 of them. And you can sign me up for that. No problem.
I don't hate
it. You could get cute and you could add the both of them to Trey McBride, who's going at tight end 1 right now. I would not. I think that 2 Cardinals is already close to too many.
Oh, you want to have 3? Oh, no.
No, you can't. We can't be doing all that. Let's get the obvious out of the way now. This was one of the best tight end seasons of all time that we saw out of him last year, bar none. He was unbelievably productive, just drive after drive, play after play. He was catching everything that was thrown at him. He had great hands. I think he only had 1 drop last season, which is an unbelievable drop rate for as much as he was getting targeted. There's a lot, though, that needs to be pulled back on. It's like you said, pulling back the hood on Michael Wilson. You can do the same for Trey McBride, and it's not super pretty. The first thing that I'll point out is, so in the last 10 years, the average tight end, the average tight end 1, runs, I believe, 400 or so, 450 routes, something to that effect. Trey McBride, like Michael Wilson, ran right around 600 routes. He was running routes and getting targeted as if he played 22 games last year, and they were all condensed into 16 fantasy games, of course. That's not something that's repeatable. It just isn't. As bad as they are and as much as they're going to be trying to catch up with other teams, They can't do that again, especially because Jeremiah Love is going to exist, and a lot of these short area Trey McBride targets are probably going to turn into Jeremiah Love targets. Or maybe they just turn into a Jeremiah Love handoff, or a James Conner handoff, or a Tyler Algier handoff. Like, a big chunk of the reason that this passing game was so good is because they just couldn't run the ball with anyone. They were looking at Keontae Ingram and who was the other
Oh,
back?
Michael Carter. Yeah,
Michael
it got
Carter.
ugly last year.
Michael Carter was there. Yeah,
Hmm.
it was bad. It was a perfect storm for Trey McBride scoring a billion fantasy points last year, and he's probably still going to be good. There's not a lot of great tight ends, but I don't think this is a good draft pick.
I agree at tight end 1. I
Mhm.
still do have him at tight end 2. I have Brock Bowers as my tight end 1 this year. But yeah, so I have Player Profiler pulled up here. He actually ran 683 routes
No.
last year. Just
Ah.
insane. So at the top, I told you about how I did some regression articles recently. And here's what I found out when kind of researching some of these tight end routes. So in the last 10 years, Joe, I was only actually able to find one other tight end who had even ran over 600 routes in a season. And it was Evan Ingram that year that he had, 100 and something catches with the Jaguars a
Yeah,
few years ago.
yeah.
That was it. Nobody else comes
I
close
didn't
to
know he ran that
600.
many routes. Okay,
And he ran 683, right?
right.
So it's just absurd, but it's hard to argue with what he's done now for 2 years. He broke the record
Mhm.
last year for most catches. He
Yeah.
has the most catches by tight end in a 2-year span in NFL history.
Mhm.
Um, and so McBride he's awesome. He's the alpha in that offense. He's going to be the one that's going to still command 25 to 27% target share, and you don't have to really worry about with him. He's going to get his, um,
Mhm.
but he's not going to lap the field like he did last year,
Right.
I don't think. And so at tight end 2, I think he's fine. I'll still
Mhm.
take him there. I'm not one of these guys who thinks that Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren should be like leapfrogging him just yet. Just because McBride's proven it for the last few years that he's a dog and he's going to get his. So it's not going to be what it was last year. Obviously, you can't expect
Mhm.
that, but I still do think he's a very good pick relative, obviously, at his position.
Yeah, I think at his position, like, as tight end 2, I have nothing against that. I think that part of the problem, though, is he's going around guys like James Cook and Amarian Hampton. He's going around, George Pickens. Let me pull up and scroll. He's going
Yeah,
around
I'm gonna take those guys
Rashee
over
Rice,
him. Yeah,
Devon Achane, Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, all guys who I think are probably
he
safer.
should go right around that Olave range. I
Yeah,
would say. Yep.
I think that I don't remember exactly how I have, McBride ranked, but he's probably going to be closer to above Olave than he's going to be to the range he's at now, which is above guys like Chase Brown and James Cook. Like,
Hmm.
I would much rather have, those guys anchoring the running back position down, especially because in a guillotine league, there's 18 starting tight ends week 1. Like,
Hmm.
if you have the worst starting tight end week 1, genuinely, it doesn't matter because 4 other guys also had the worst starting tight end week 1. You were all tied for the worst. All 4 of them scored 0 points.
Right.
So, let's talk some Cardinals back end players. Very quickly, wide receiver 127, Kendrick Bourne. Um, First question, no cheating. Can you name any Cardinals wide receiver other than Kendrick Bourne?
Yes. So I know they have a guy by the name of Xavier Weaver who sounds like a creative player on Madden. And I know that they also do have Devin Duvernay because for some reason I got some notification that said that he was on the team. So I'm
Okay,
pretty sure
cool.
those two guys are there. Other than that, though, I couldn't tell you. Um, But no, Kendrick Bourne's not going to matter this year, even if he, plays the slot or anything. I
Right.
will say, funny story. Last year, right before his 2-game blow up that he had, I had a nice call out on X. Hey, go start Kendrick Bourne as like kind of like a tongue in cheek joke, and then
Yeah.
he goes out and has a career game with 11 142. So and I started him in my home league, and that helped me win that week.
Hell yeah.
So so I'll always have a nice soft spot for Kendrick Bourne for
Mhm.
blowing up for me there when I kind of pulled that one out of the hat. But he's not going to matter. And the running backs, we talked about it a little bit with Love. These guys are going to be gnats, right? They're gonna kind of eat away at Love's touches, and they're gonna be annoying. Algier has proven that he can score touchdowns, so I do think he'll have some utility in the red zone for them. But it's going to be annoying for Love managers, and
Mhm.
maybe the Cardinals showcase James Conner a little bit in the preseason or early in the year, and they just end up trading him to like a running back needy team or something. But
Mhm.
if for some reason this team just rotates all three of them, it's going to be really annoying for fantasy. And I'm hoping
It's
that doesn't happen.
well, I mean, we're talking about famously good for fantasy Nathaniel Hackett. He would never do
Ugh,
something like that to us at offensive coordinator.
ugh.
Yeah, he was right. I don't think James Conner's on this team week 1. I think
I,
that
I
James
hope not.
Conner they've gotta
It's
find another home for one of these backs. Maybe they trade Trey Benson instead, and I'll be a little disappointed if it's Benson and not Connor. Um, I think that it helps a lot that Drew Petzig is the Lions offensive coordinator, and the Lions don't have an RB2 right now, and they need one. You can say Isaiah Pacheco's their RB2. He's not.
yeah, I'm not a Pacheco fan, so I'm
No.
I'm, I'm there with you.
Yeah, I like running backs who can run forward, run towards the correct end zone instead of the opposing team's end zone on 3rd and 6, please, and thank you very much. Um, yeah, I think odds are pretty good that one of the Cardinals running backs makes their way to Detroit at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them made their way to the Raiders, maybe. The Raiders don't have anyone behind Ashton Genty. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
know
just
they
it's just
drafted
Mike
Mike
Washington.
Washington,
Yeah,
but, like, if something happens to Genty, he cannot carry the load.
agreed.
So,
I can see that.
hopefully hopefully the Raiders end up with one of them, that'd be great. And the most boring team in the NFC West to finish off our episode, the Super Bowl champion, 14-3 last year, Seattle Seahawks, who averaged 4 touchdowns a game, and we don't care. We do not care. Sam Darnold's going at QB 23. Um, I don't think there's a lot to be said about Sam Darnold. I don't know if he has a easy early season schedule, and I probably should have checked on that. But to me, he feels like a guy who, A, the Vikings wish that they still had on their team. B, is probably just getting started when there's a good matchup, a team that we expect them to throw the ball on a lot. Um, but this is really just a run the ball and play defense team, and he's gonna game manage that team. He had 5 games last season where he did not throw a touchdown pass.
Yeah.
You cannot you cannot have like a 1 in 3, 1 in 4 chance that your guillotine quarterback is just not gonna throw a touchdown. You can't do it.
No, I hear you. You mentioned the schedule. I pulled it up real quick. So they
Thank you.
start opening night with the Patriots in the Super Bowl rematch. Then he's got
Right.
then he's got the Cardinals,
Ooh,
Commanders,
okay,
Chargers,
okay.
49ers, Broncos. So it's a mixed bag, right? He's got some cake, matchups there, and he's got some tougher ones. So
He's gonna
he,
headline my start sit episode week 2 and week 3 probably,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's gonna
yeah.
be about it.
I could see that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how much he's going to matter, unless it's like a super flex format. Um, I'm happy for the guy. I mean, he's had a tremendous career turnaround, back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons. He was, second in first read target share. So the guy, he knows what he does well, right? He
Mhm.
hones in on his top guy, and last year that was obviously JSN. Um, but now without Kubiak,
Mhm.
how is that offense going to look? Right? You lost Ken Walker,
Right.
Charbonnet's on the mend, so there could be more passing volume this year, but maybe not as efficient as he was, right? And so maybe those
Right.
2 just gonna kinda cancel each other out. So, I don't see a lot of upside with Darnold. I think he's like a fine fill-in as a pinch, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
He's a decent floor QB2 and super flex formats, but
Yeah.
in this kind of format, I don't know if he matters too much.
If you're playing Guillotine Superflex, he's worth a little bit more consideration, but that's only for the real
You
sickos out
sicko.
there.
Yeah, sicko.
All right. RB27 Jadarian Price. I have so many conflicting thoughts on Jadarian Price. It is genuinely as if the football gods decided, what if we make the most controversial running back for Joe that you can possibly imagine? Because I really don't enjoy rookies in a guillotine format, but I really do enjoy when someone has their backfield mate a little bit, like you said, on the mend going into the season. But I've also never seen this guy play football, and when I've seen him play football, he was an RB2. He was great, and he got drafted in the first round. Maybe he shouldn't have been drafted in the first round, but still got drafted in the first round
Yep.
to a team that wants to run the ball.
Yes.
He doesn't catch the ball. They want him to catch the ball, but I've never seen him catch the ball. I it I've been back and forth ex all the time on this guy. I think I'm just probably gonna slap him right at consensus RB27 and let the fates decide.
That's not bad. I will say, if you haven't been on X, there was a beautiful clip of Jadarian Price in training camp on a go route, beating a
Mm,
corner, and
that's
he
right.
gets a step on him. Beautiful over the shoulder grab, right? So you're right, though. At Notre Dame, we really didn't see a whole lot as a receiver, and that was probably by design because Jeremiah Love is so good at that, right? You're not going to take him
Yeah.
off the field for a lesser player. Um, but I will say Price may be the best pure runner in the draft to come out of that draft this year as a prospect. He averaged 6 yards per
Mhm.
carry at Notre Dame. The guy just looks smooth, right? Running
Yeah.
between the tackles and getting downfield. Um, so, but again, we don't know a whole lot on how that's going to translate to the NFL because he saw so few touches in college behind Jeremiah Love. So
Right.
I think he's going to be good, and I think he has the skills to be good. And he did get the draft capital, like you mentioned, first round draft capital. They're going to
Mhm.
probably feed him the ball at some point
Right.
to make that investment worthwhile. So yeah, I mean, at RB27, I think he's probably pretty appropriately priced. He could go either way, though, a few spots, based on how Seattle decides to use him, essentially.
Mhm. I think this is someone also who we're going to learn more about as preseason rolls on and comes through. If I don't know if Seattle plays their starters or not, but like if they don't play their starters and Jadarian Price just doesn't get any action as a rookie, that's a huge vote of confidence, and
Yeah.
I'd be willing to put him farther up there. And I that's a good point. I do like the point on him just not catching passes because Jeremiah Love is one of the best pass catching running backs to come out of the draft in a while. So hopefully he can do some more of that here. It's this is someone who I'm going to be talking about for the next 2 months. And
Hmm.
I don't have an
Right.
answer on Jadarian Price right now. And I'm not going to give an answer that I don't believe in just yet. But RB27 is reasonable. I think it's he's a good bridge running back between, Jalen Warren, who's going as the running back just above him, to the Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson guys just below him, who are either on a much worse offense in Pollard's case or are splitting time in Ramondre's case, and also Tony Pollard splitting time.
Yeah,
He's the last of the guys who you can talk yourself into a really big workload for.
I can see that.
Speaking of a big workload at wide receiver 3, Jackson Smith and Jigba had count them, one singular game below 13 PPR points last season. That
So good.
is so good. It's so great for this format. It's just he had 1,800 yards last season. I agree with what you said about lacking Clint Kubiak and that probably being rough. But like he can drop 400 yards, he can drop 300 yards off of his total, and he could probably add that back in receptions because I think they could see themselves just throwing a greater number of passes. They're probably not going to be as efficient of passes, but the defense is going to take a step back. They don't have as good of a running game as they had last season. Even if Jarian Price is awesome, he's not as good as Kenneth Walker. And so I like him. I love this guy. I'm going to be drafting him. I have a note of I'm drafting him over Jahmyr Gibbs in this format. There's definitely a world where he finishes as like a Triple Crown winner type of guy because the rest of the offense is just designed to always go to him. Last season, at the beginning of the year, the JSN plays you were seeing were insane downfield, deep balls, and he was great at it. And then defenses started to clue in on it, and they still couldn't stop him. Even though they could shadow over the top of him, they just found other ways to get JSN the ball. I think that he's good enough to continue warranting that level of target share. And it wouldn't surprise me if he catches more passes this year than he did last year. The yards are probably coming down.
Yeah, I think so. As you mentioned, I mean, he was just absolutely incredible last season. He had the 8th most receiving yards in NFL history. All right. So any way you slice it, I mean, JSN was just ludicrous last year. And obviously he won the Offensive Player of the Year. Well-deserved. There was nobody better than him last season. He was phenomenal. And going back to the regression talk, like we talked about, this was the third guy that I touched on. So talking about target share, in the last 10 years, I couldn't find anybody who had a larger target share than JSN did last year. It was pushing 36%. All right. The only two guys who came close was rookie year Malik Neighbors, who was just under 35%.
That's so awesome.
And 2018 DeAndre Hopkins, who was just a tad over 35%. Those two guys, those two guys were the only ones close. JSN was darn near 36%. And it was just absurd, right? I mean, Darnold only had eyes for him, basically.
Yeah.
And that's awesome if you had JSN. He's my dynasty number 1 this year. I will say I have him at wide receiver 4 behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, just because as you mentioned, I do think the yards are going to come down a little bit. And I love the Lions, just easy cakewalk schedule. So JSN's my wide receiver 4. But I'm happy to take him like in the middle of the first round in any format. I mean, I think the guy's still going to crush it. He's still going to eat. He's going to get 170 targets in his sleep, essentially. So I love everything about him, and he's one of like the safest picks I think you can make in fantasy.
Gotta be. It's rare that you find someone who is A, this good, and B, this much better than everyone else on their offense. Like Jamar Chase and Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are ahead of him. Those guys, like their competition on their team is way better than anyone on the Seahawks.
Yeah.
It's not remotely close. The offense is always going through Jackson Smith and Jigba to it's like getting a workhorse running back and being able to start him as a wide receiver, genuinely. And there are more workhorse running backs in the NFL than there are workhorse wide receivers in the NFL. I'm very excited about him. The target share, like as a percentage of the targets, I think, obviously will come down. It's not replicable. It's not remotely replicable. Part of that, I think, is because so many JSN targets just ended drives last season. Like
Yeah.
opportunities for other
Yeah. I
dudes
mean,
to get
he was scoring
targets.
from all over the place.
Yeah. Like he just completely erased other people's opportunities to earn the targets that would have brought him below that threshold. Um, and I don't think he needs to have an insane target share, like something record setting for him to maintain that target level, because this is probably a team that has to throw the ball more for all the reasons that we mentioned a little bit earlier with Darnold. And that gets me really excited about Rashid Shaheed all the way down at wide receiver 56, who was just trying to get on a moving train last year. They acquired him, I want to say, during their bye week from New Orleans, and similar-ish
Hmm.
offenses, but at the end of the day, they were busy, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the Seattle Seahawks most certainly were not broken last year, so they didn't need Shaheed to come in and fix it. I think that the contract that they gave him is going to it's not getting talked about, and I think it should get talked about. They effectively chose to keep Rashid Shaheed over Kenneth Walker. They
Yeah.
have the same contracts. Shaheed has slightly more guaranteed money, but they're getting paid the same amount of money per year. That to me signals that they have plans for him. Maybe it signals that they just don't believe in paying a running back ever, but then why are you spending a first round pick on a running back immediately after that? I don't know. So I think that similar to what we said with Dejon Stribling, them wanting to make their investment worthwhile, we could see a similar narrative happening for Rashid Shaheed all the way down at wide receiver 56, who you can pair with JSN very easily. What do we? Oh, he is frozen. He is well and thoroughly frozen. Wolf, I don't know if you can hear me on the other end. He's gone. Okay, that's fine. We can talk a little Rashid Shaheed happening here. Um, it's like we said we were talking about earlier. On JSN at least, if JSN's target share is going down, those targets have to go somewhere. And so if the targets are going somewhere, it's either going to an ancient Cooper Cup, who people aren't super excited about, or it's going to the guy who they just paid a reasonable amount of money to. And so if you start your draft with a Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then you don't really touch running back, or excuse me, if you don't really touch wide receiver a ton after that, you can slot this guy in as your wide receiver too. And you're going to feel very confident in that half of the time when Sam Darnold drops back. I get it. Sam Darnold dropbacks probably aren't as good as, the Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes dropbacks. But when he drops back to pass, you know where he's looking. Oh, it looks like he's coming back in. Let me slide my mouse over here. Let me add him into the stage. He's here. And he can hear me now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Internet cut out there.
You're all good. Happens sometimes. Um, I've said my piece on Rashid Shaheed. If you've got anything you want to add.
Yeah. So, yeah, looks like I'm back now. So we're good.
Mhm,
Apologize about that.
you're all good.
So Rashid Shaheed at cost, I think he's fine, but and I maybe I missed a little bit of what you were talking about there for a second, so I do apologize. But I'm
Mhm,
kind of avoiding him in most formats if he's going to be used like he was when he got to Seattle, right?
sure.
Um, there was just almost nothing left on the plate for him
Mhm,
after JSN got his, and so you know he wasn't seeing the type of volume and the type of targets that he was in New Orleans. It's almost like they completely flipped it around and used him as like a field stretcher, which I get, right? He has that ability. But that's not great for fantasy, and you can't count
Mhm.
on those like fluky return touchdowns that he's going to give you every now and again, once or
Sure.
twice per season. So to me, Shaheed's a little bit too much bust, not enough boom.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that he gets a little bit more this season, especially after that contract, like you mentioned,
Right.
which they gave him a pretty penny. So you got to think you're going to want to use your wide receiver too if you're paying him that much. But I don't know. I mean, early on in the season, I'm not going to feel comfortable starting him in any kind of format until
Mhm.
I kind of see it from Seattle. So I'm kind of out for those reasons.
Yeah, I think that the best case scenario, if I find myself drafting him, it's because I've already drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba, and at wide receiver 56, I've probably filled out the rest of my roster already, and I feel pretty good about that. And then I just need someone to, you know, help level the floor. And if Rashid Shaheed has a couple of bad games, honestly, I'm probably fine with that because that probably means that they were JSN games. I don't think that
Yeah.
they're going to be Jadarian Price games. They're probably not tight end games. And I mean, if they happen to turn into Cooper Cup games, then fine. The old man has, you know, fooled me. I need to get my mouse over where it needs to be. But I like the too much bust, not enough boom. We haven't seen a lot of boom out of him, but hopefully a full off season helps with that. He might be able to become a standalone Gabe Davis sort of fella.
So that's the
At
second
tight
Gabe
end,
Davis reference too, by the way, you've made
I
tonight.
do a lot of Gabe Davis references. I'm gonna be like that. That's one of my classic um classic references. The
I've been
Gabe Davis of
counting.
old. Yeah, because man, that guy, oh, he had one season where he
Hmm.
had like 6 games below 6 points, and he had 6 more games above 24 points. Why are you like this? It didn't make
Yeah.
sense. And then the Bills had to get a more consistent offense, and they had to get ruin the fun with, who's their guy? I'm blanking on him. He's their head coach now.
Oh, Joe Brady.
Joe Brady, thank you.
Yeah.
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 Went and
Well, the,
ruined
the
Gabe
funny
Davis.
thing with I remember Gabe Davis, he had that 4 touchdown postseason game, and then everybody
200.
next year was like drafting him in like round 4, and then he just was just the complete biggest bust possible. It was very predictable,
It
but
was so fun, especially because that season, with a handful of my college friends, we did our first dynasty, startup draft, and we did an auction. He went for
oh no.
32 of $200,
Oh no.
and in 2 years, he was on the Jaguars
Yep.
doing nothing. Shet good pick, Connor. Good
Hmm.
stuff. Tight end 23, AJ Barner. Um, it's late. We're getting close to the sun's been down for a while. They've got a lot of tight ends on this team. They drafted Elijah Arroyo. Um, I don't know when I'm going to feel confident enough to start AJ Barner unless he's got a good matchup and it's early in the season. Maybe maybe like what I said earlier about Rashid Shaheed. We're both in agreement that the JSN target share, just by virtue of the laws of mathematics, has to go down.
Yeah.
And those targets then have to go somewhere. AJ Barner could see tons of them. He was good in the playoffs, um, but I think part of that was because there was no Charbonnet, there was no running back catching passes. Walker caught a couple, but for the most part, if Jadarian Price is going to get a short area target role, which maybe he does, hopefully he does, um, I think that eats AJ Barner a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Barner, I mean, he's fine. He took a nice second year leap. He was tight end 20 in fantasy points per game. Basically, it just boils down to if he scores a touchdown, it's good for you that week. If
Mhm.
he's not, if he doesn't score one, you're getting like 4 to 5 points, right?
Yeah.
Not enough volume from him. And yeah, he had a good Super Bowl, I think it was, but then like the week before he had like 3 points, the NFC Championship game. So
Yeah,
it kind of like Rashid Shaheed. It's very boom or bust. If he gets the
mhm,
touchdown, you're going to be happy. If you started him and he doesn't, you're going to be like cursing the gods, right? Like, why
for
did I
sure.
start this guy? So, um, I, yeah, I just don't see the upside. I just don't see it.
I don't either, especially looking at the guys who are going after him. Like you've got Gunnar Helm and Kenyon Sadiq, a little bit on the younger side, guys who I wouldn't want to start week one, but guys who I feel better about than AJ Barner. The big thing for me though is Jalen Naylor going after him, who should not be going after him.
No,
I
no,
Jalen Naylor is probably the wide receiver one on his team. It's not a
absolutely.
high bar to clear, and it's not sexy, but like he I don't think it's an exaggeration to say he probably needs to be being drafted 50 picks higher than
I,
where he's
I
going right now.
I will, if you go read some of my stuff online, I'm probably like the biggest Jalen Naylor like
Mhm.
advocate in fantasy right now.
I
Like,
I remember,
yeah,
you posted something the other day about his, separation metrics over on, I wanna say it's the reception perception data, that you pulled that from.
could have been. Yeah, I mean, Naylor. And we're getting a little off track here, but
Sure.
Naylor, I think he's going to be, at worst, the third target for the Raiders, and so he's being like severely underdrafted.
Mhm.
I think that he's to come up, like you said, because he has a great shot at just leading that receiver room in targets.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise anyone. Alright, let's talk about some scrubs on the Seahawks. Scrub number 1, Cooper Kupp, which is an odd
Washed.
thing to say. Yeah, I mean, just the way that he ended last season was so brutal. He had, like, week 2, he was really good. There was like, "Oh my gosh, is Cooper Kupp back? Is this a resurgence?" He was not back. He was not even close to back. He was more what's the opposite of back? Gone? Is gone the opposite of back? I don't know if gone's the opposite of back.
Yeah,
He was
washed.
his
I mean,
washed, sure.
yeah, he could even start coming off the field for Torrey Horton this year,
Wouldn't
So
shock me.
so yeah, I don't see a world where I'm taking Cooper Cup in any format.
I think there's one format where I'm drafting Cooper Kupp, and it's where I'm in, like, a self-imposed challenge to only draft white players. At that point, by process of elimination, Cooper Kupp's gonna make his way onto my team. Other than that,
As like a
it's
player
probably
coach.
right. Yeah, he belongs there. He might okay, this might sound crazy. He could be a JSN handcuff. Like, if JSN gets hurt and they need someone to be a route guy and soak up
Yeah,
some targets, maybe. Um, but there's not a lot of Cooper Kupp being picked. You can make better picks
yeah.
than just drafting Cooper Kupp for the sake of his name. Running back 48, Zach Charbonnet, who is it's like I said earlier, the inverse of what I'm feeling with Price, the push and the pull. I'm feeling the push and the pull on Charbonnet in opposite directions. He's hurt to start the year. You can't start him week one, but he might be a really excellent investment. Like, do you think you can cobble together a team? Like, if I'm willing to reach a little bit on if I've already got 2 running backs and I draft Zach Charbonnet for my flex, I can reach down, I can get Jalen Naylor 30 picks above ADP to make sure that I get him and slide him in week 1. I could talk myself into that. I shouldn't. I shouldn't talk myself into that because that's how people get eliminated week 1 in their guillotine leagues.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
hubris might win out. It might beat me.
I'm not one that's buying these reports that he's going to play like week one early in the year. I just think it's asinine, right? Like the guy tore his ACL in the playoffs, and he didn't even get surgery until like middle or late February because they were waiting on like swelling to go down. So
Mhm.
I mean that's only what 6 months ago, if that, right? I don't see any scenario in where Charbonnet is playing like before Halloween. And even if he is on the field, he's not going to be anywhere close to like a full down or
Mhm.
every down player, right? Maybe he suits up, maybe they throw him out there for a couple plays, but you're never going to feel comfortable starting him. So
Right.
unless he's like there with like a final pick, I'm not taking him in this format at all.
Sure. As a guy who you can just throw onto your IR, if you're looking at your bench players, if you already have one bench player who you feel good about starting, you can feel good drafting Charbonnet and sliding him into the IR spot, and that'll be fine. But I think you make a good point that by the time he comes back, it'll probably be a while before you're willing to start him. And then it's like I said about a couple of guys earlier in the show. I don't remember who it was, but by the time you feel comfortable starting him, your league is smaller. And instead of having, 36 starting running backs like you will week 1, you've got 18 starting running backs. And are you going to start Zach Charbonnet over who's going at RB20 right now? That'd be like a
David Montgomery kind of.
Yeah, David Montgomery type of player. You'd be looking at Cam Scadaboo, looking at Bucky Irving, those type of guys. There's no way you could talk me into a Zach Charbonnet over some of those guys. And so if you're drafting right now, and it's like, okay, the season doesn't start for another month and a half, 2 months, maybe he comes back faster. But if the reports go the way that most medical experts think they're going to go, you probably shouldn't end up with any Charbonnet unless you just do not respect your league mates at all. And this is a pick where you are dropping your nuts on the table, which is fun. You can do that.
It is.
And then finally, Emmanuel Wilson / George Halani might do things week 1, and so I feel like I kind of got to talk about him because there's going to be no Charbonnet, because the guy who's starting ahead of them is a rookie. Like, what happens if Emmanuel Wilson sits the first preseason game and Jadarian Price is out there taking handoffs from Drew Lock?
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Emmanuel Wilson at that point, right?
Yeah, I know one of them is going to be worth a stab at late in drafts. It might be Halani though. I mean, kind of from what I'm seeing online, Wilson's like completely buried. He's not even getting anywhere close to starter reps, whereas Halani is actually getting starter reps. He's getting mixed in with Price. And we kind of saw him take a little bit of that burden off Kenneth Walker in the playoffs last year when Charbonnet went down. He had about a 33% snap share in the final 2 games of the playoffs, including the Super Bowl. So he was out there for passing downs. They like his pass protection. He's a capable receiver. So it might be Halani as the guy. Maybe you want to take a shot at him, with one of your final picks if you're looking for like a guy who could maybe give you some usable weeks first month of the season kind of thing.
I think that Halani does really fit the bill of someone who I love to draft with one of my last picks, because the guys you're drafting with your last picks are guys that are probably going to get cut from your team because it's a juicy waiver wire. You're always going to want to add someone. And so the guys who I'm taking with my last pick or 2 in a guillotine draft, I want it to be someone like George Halani, who maybe he goes out there and has like a 45-50% snap share and matters, and I know I don't want to cut him. Or maybe he goes out there and sucks, and then I'm fine to cut him. But I know after I watched 1 game, and that's all I need. I don't want to be using these late picks on like Elijah Surratt, Malachi Fields, guys who I think are way more talented and have much better upside than George Halani. But you're not going to feel as comfortable cutting them as you're going to feel cutting George Halani. It's more of it's a stress saving draft pick.
Yeah.
Because the last round of your guillotine draft, it doesn't matter. Like I should actually, at some point, I should go through every league I was in last season, and I should look at the last round of the guillotine draft. And I should just count how many players were remotely startable at any point in the year. And I bet the number is going to be close to 0. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Helani fits the bill of a very, very short term. You see one thing and you know if you need them.
I like it.
Yeah. And with that, we're finally that was much longer than I had intended on it being. And you're on the East Coast. I apologize
No,
profusely
no,
for making for keeping you up as long as I did.
no,
Mr.
don't
Wolf,
worry, man.
where can people find your work?
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And thank you for kind of, accommodating my schedule because you and I
Oh, of course.
talked. So I do appreciate that. But absolutely, man, this was a blast. I appreciate it. I'd love to do it again with you here soon.
Mhm.
Like you talked about at the top of the show, you can find me on Twitter, on X at Dynasty Wolf. And you can find all of my written works at a couple different places at Player Profiler, at Fantasy Pros, and then it's behind a paywall, but you can also find it over at Dynasty Football Factory as well. And those guys are awesome over there. Only a couple bucks a month if you want to get on that. But yeah, Player Profiler, Fantasy Pros, Dynasty Football Factory. That's where all my work is, and hopefully you'll see me on some more pods here soon.
Mhm. We would love to have you. All right. Wolf, thank you very much for coming. I really do appreciate it. Everyone, if you're still watching or listening at the very end of this very long NFC West discussion, I mean, it's the NFC West. That's a big division. You got to discuss it for a
Yeah,
long time.
some great
Um,
teams.
really great teams and one really atrocious one. But with that, thank you all so much for tuning in. We hope to catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.